Welcome to another episode of Sober on a Drunk Planet. I'm very honoured to have Rob on this week. Rob used to live a couple of minutes away from me, but I've always followed him on Instagram since I started, and it's been really inspiring seeing his journey. It's different again to mine, different to probably yours as well, but he's done so much in his sobriety, I thought it'd be rude not to have him on. And yeah, we'll just get his backstory today and then see all the exciting stuff that he's now doing in sobriety. So thanks for coming on, Rob. How are you getting on?
Yeah, very good, Sean. Thanks. Really appreciate the invite to come on and have a chat with you on the podcast.
Brilliant. So I know we've already tried this and it already cut off, and we're re-recording this for the second time. So hopefully my Zoom, I should really pay for an upgrade, I think. So we just want to get a backstory really from you to see what was life like for Rob, how the drinking and, if applicable, drugging then manifested itself to the point where you then gave up. And then we'll talk about all the exciting stuff. We'll talk a bit about stoicism as well, because I know both of us are keen on the ancient Stoics. And yeah, just see all the things about your running, because I've driven past you a few times. Being 6'6" or however tall you are, you're quite easy to spot.
Yeah, not quite 6'6", but 6'3", but close enough. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just give us a bit of a background of growing up, I guess, and getting to the point where you then decided that you wanted to give up alcohol.
Yeah, cool. So I'm originally from New Zealand. Pretty, I guess, normal sort of upbringing. There's nothing, no terrible tragedies or anything in my background that turned me into the drink and drugs or anything like that. So yeah, just really got into drinking. I think, like most people do, I guess, when I was about 15, I think, or maybe it's a little bit earlier when you're in the UK, but for me, it was 15, 16, few beers round a mate's house on a Friday night after school, that sort of thing. And then pretty much, played rugby since I was about 5, and that was probably a big contributor to where I started drinking as well, at the rugby club and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it.
I think rugby clubs. So I've always grown up in rugby clubs. My dad's played for a rugby team his whole life, and it's yeah, it's. I don't
Yeah,
think I know
they go
many. I
hand in
don't
hand,
know
don't
anyone who's sober in a rugby club.
they? Yeah, they pretty much go hand in hand. I mean, but that's a lot of the things with alcohol, isn't it? In a lot of societies, they use it for celebrations and for commiserations as well. So, win or lose on the booze is what we used to say.
Which is why you always have, like, we've got Wimbledon first team, we've then got Wimbledon B, C, D, E, and F team, and by the time you get to the F team, it's more about the alcohol than it is the rugby, I think.
Yeah. The other one was our drinking team has a rugby problem. Yeah.
and and that's so true as well. Yeah, brilliant. So you got into sports, I guess. I find personally from people I've met, Kiwis, I was about to say Aussies under the same breath, but there is a commonality in drinking. I find, and it is. I started drinking when I was 14, very much the same. Pubs in Rains Park used to let us in with no ID back then as well. It was all before social media and anything like that, so it was a lot easier. And then, like you said, sports clubs as well, rugby, golf, all those. It was always quite intrinsic with play around the golf, go to the 19th hole, or like you said, it was a drinking team with a rugby problem.
Yeah.
uh,
Well, that's one thing I actually remember from childhood is dad's a mad golfer. He's been playing for years and years, and we got into it. And I remember Sunday evenings, he'd play golf in the morning and we'd go off to church. and asked mum, why is dad not coming to church? And there was, he's doing his own conversations with God as he shanks one into the trees. But we used to always go along to the golf club afterwards and have a meal there with dad and everyone else that he'd be playing with, and they'd have a few drinks and things. But for me, I never saw anyone in my life like drunk, or maybe I just didn't realize that they were, or anything like that. So problem drinking and things like that wasn't something that I really saw in New Zealand until I was like maybe 17, 18, started doing my own drinking, and I'd be like, oh wow, everyone's really wankered, like and then I'd sort of look back and go, oh, because there's probably one time where I remember mum being in bed and dad just go, oh, mum's just got a bit of a headache, and like thinking back now is like, oh no, mum had been over at the neighbours having a few wines and things like that. So yeah, I never really saw like my parents drunk at all when I was growing up.
So when do you think the problem drinking started? Was it when you sort of started turning 18 and then went into work? You were in the army at some point, weren't you?
Yeah, so I think in problem drinking, I guess, my drinking was at the weekends. I'd go to school, I'd be 16, 17. I wasn't like thinking, oh, I need to go have a drink on the weekend and things like that. It was just, hanging out with your mates, and like, yeah, we'll get a 12 pack of beers and would sit down and would drink those. And that was it. That would be a Friday night. You get drunk and you wake up Saturday, in the winter, you probably wouldn't go out Friday night because you got rugby. But Saturday, you'd smash down a good 12 beers drunk. And then, you're 16, 17, you'd wake up Sunday, no hangover, and crack on. And
Yeah.
I guess I didn't see it then as problem drinking, because it wasn't causing any problems. I was cracking on. I wasn't waking up on Monday morning going, oh, I need to have a drink. It's affecting school and things like that. It was just what it was. But always from that young age, 16, 17, I always drank to excess. Like, always had, a 12 pack, 24 pack. And if I had the beers, I'd finish them.
There was no self-control from an early age then.
Yeah. And now when I look back on it, it's more about like social anxiety type of feelings that I had. Like, I wasn't very good at socializing. So having booze turned me into what I got the nickname from a mate, was a 6'3" toddler. But it used to turn me into like this completely different person, and I'd be chatty, and
yeah,
obviously it goes too far a number of times. But yeah, I used to be a 6'3" toddler, and when I was in the pub, just banging around like learning to walk again.
It's funny, isn't it? I think, especially with rugby teams as well, football teams, you get a lot of alter egos named for people, and it normally is when they've had a drink. It's a bit like, I think it was one of the Will Ferrell films, Frank the Tank, where he suddenly has a couple of beers and that's it. He's running off naked down the road, and his wife picks him up.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, there's always been like a drinking culture in New Zealand. Like, when you turn 21 in New Zealand, like, you do a yard glass. Like, what?
Yeah, that's rugby.
Sure. Yeah,
they do that loads at the rugby club as well.
Yeah, initiations is always drinking. I mean, yeah, it's every
drinking out of shoes for some reason. Drinking out of a boot.
Yeah, I've drunk out of a number of boots. Yeah.
I guess it is funny at the time, isn't it? Like, you're in a group of people. There is an element of, you do have fun, and it is largely normalised to feel like. I think when you get older, the hangovers. I don't know if it's the same with you, but my hangovers got worse and worse, to the point where it was starting to impact on things. But because everyone else was sort of glorifying the hangovers as a way of saying what a good night that was, I'm really hungover, I'm on the sofa all day. You don't actually question it. You just accept that was a fun weekend. But the truth is, it probably wasn't. But
Yeah.
towards the end of the drinking, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I actually had a post, with the memories on Facebook come up, and it was 12 years ago that said, I'm laying on the sofa watching The Hangover with a hangover again. Like, and that was just, and I remember the times back there, like I'd go out after work on a Friday night, and then Saturday, because I'd stop playing rugby and stuff, I'd just sit on the sofa, watch The Hangover, and just because I was absolutely hungover and couldn't be asked to do anything, and you just go to work on the Monday, and then hungover all weekend, and then you just keep repeating it, repeat.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I think when you start doing Mondays fresh and in looking forward to the week ahead, it's a completely different mindset to living sort of for the weekend, where you then sort of ruin half your week as well by the time that you've sobered up and you've got over all the impacts of the alcohol leaving your system. And with age, it just seems to get worse as well.
Yeah, well, you sort of don't live in the moment, do you? You miss out living now because you're regretting what you did a couple of days ago, or you're looking forward to the weekend when that comes along, and you don't get to, you don't sit there and appreciate what you're doing right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a big problem with drinking society, as it were. That whole presence thing is something that I personally, I don't know if you've read the Eckhart Tolle books, like The Power of Now, but that is essentially the main teachings from that. And it's just good to get your mindset, because when you focus on something, whether you're out with family or you're doing some work, like the level of attention and enjoyment you get from it's much better when you're not constantly worrying about things or projecting troubles into the future that might never happen. And I think that's one of the tools that people start to latch onto in sobriety, is that being able to be more present for the moments.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing there when I decided to get sober was, look, the biggest thing that helped me was meditation, and that is all about, this moment right now. And, I used to do daily meditation, sit down for, started 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, in half an hour. Then I was doing like an hour a day, like meditation. And then I sort of got to a point where I stopped doing daily meditation because it's just in my everyday. So it's in everything that I do. Like I'm more present, as you say, in everything that I do. So I don't try to, like, I'll sit down every now and again and do a nice guided meditation for an hour or something like that, just to chill out. But most of my days, the goal is to just be present, which is the same as meditation. So it's almost like, just practicing it in everything I do.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because I think what a lot of people do is, and I'm the same, but I've done meditation before. I've done probably the most I've done is 30, 40 minutes. And you feel amazing for doing it, but it's not, it's something I fall out of, because it is a tool. At the end of the day, if my mind's racing, I know that I could use meditation to get back into it, use the guided meditations, build up the time again, to help me back into that sort of steady state. But I think a lot of people get so frustrated with meditation because they think they should be doing it every day. But like you said, it's a tool. If you need to go back to it, then that's what you do, and it's really useful.
Yeah, it's like, I remember early on in my sobriety when I was doing meditation every day and I was stuck in traffic. I was going to a work conference, and I was stuck in traffic going through the Dartford Tunnel, I think it was.
Yeah.
And it was just absolute traffic. And I was like, oh, but then I was like, oh, traffic. And I was like, well, it is what it is. Like, there is nothing I can do about this. So there's no point in like getting wound up about it. Just like did a little breathing exercise, and then just sat there in the traffic. And it just, I just doing that and realizing that. And I was like, oh, I feel so much better now. and just you just sat in that traffic and eventually got through the tunnel and got to the conference. It was just like,
that's exactly it, isn't it? It's mindfulness. I mean, it's a bit of a buzz term that I think a lot of people think, oh, mindfulness, but it's things like that that you could either do what you've done or you can let it escalate. So your anxiety levels will go through the roof because you're winding yourself up. And by the time you get to work or wherever it was you're going, your sort of nervous system's already at a state where you're like, fuck this, I'm ready to fight.
yeah,
uh,
that's
and
exactly what it is.
I think road rage is the easiest one because people can let all their anger and troubles get sparked by someone driving a bit like an idiot. But I always now say to myself before I get angry, I'm like, does it really matter? Do I need to go and chase them at 50 miles an hour to start bibbing my horn and potentially get in a fight or end up in prison or anything? And it just doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah, and it's like, if you get wound up at someone who like cuts you off in traffic, that person isn't bothered that they cut you off. They're getting on with their day, and you're holding on to all this anger and angst. And it's really, you've let this 1 second affect you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it may be. And then it affects your whole drive, and you're still thinking about this person that cut you off. Meanwhile, that person is off there, they're at home doing whatever they want. They're having a great life. And you're sitting there thinking about this person going, oh, and it's just like, oh, what a
Yeah.
waste.
It's funny, isn't it? I think having that sobriety, that sort of clear head, and we'll come on to it in a bit, but the sort of stoicism quotes, even the quotes that I've listened to, I've read a lot of the Ryan Holiday books and all the other variations and meditations that are out there, but it's just very good at making you sort of come back to just being sensible. I think Seneca said that we suffer more in imagination than we do reality. And once you sort of understand that saying, you actually think, you know what, half of the mental energy and emotions that I'm sort of wasting are all done on things that I'm making up in my head.
And that actually is one of the big things about my drinking, because my social anxiety that I had was around, when I'd go to the pub, I'd think there's people sitting there watching me thinking, what's this guy doing? Like, when in reality, no one cares about you. I mean, that's the truth. No one cares about you. Everyone cares about themselves. So when you're sat in a pub, no one's sitting there watching you. So I'd be like, oh, people are watching me, boom, smashing beers. Well, why are they watching? Like, get these thoughts in my head, and that's that. You suffer more in imagination than you do in reality. And then once I really sort of figured and went, no one gives a shit about you, Rob. I was like, oh, just go to the pub, and like now I'll go to a pub and have a few beers. Well, I'll have the alcohol-free beers, but I would sit down and have a few beers with friends and things like that. And it's just so much more relaxing, like when you're actually there in the moment with friends, as opposed to thinking, who's looking at, why are people judging me, or whatever it may be.
And it's funny, isn't it? I think from a male perspective that you think a 6'3" rugby player in a pub would not suffer from social anxiety, but 99% of people drink alcohol because everyone, I mean, if you looked at everyone's thought processes in the pub at the same time, everyone's projecting their own insecurities onto everyone else. I mean, it's a bit of a shit show if you actually thought about it. And that's why alcohol is such a leveler for people. Well, I say a leveler, it's sort of trying to numb the anxiety, I guess. But then when people are like us, we don't have an off button, that's when the problems start, I guess. So just going back to your history of drinking, at what point did it escalate to a point? Obviously, you've been in the army, haven't you? Do you think that had any impact on the amount that you drank?
I think it was just a good place for my drinking to be able to, I guess, be normalised. Because I remember doing an initiation when I joined the army, and must have 3-4 jugs of beer, 24 shots in like 10 minutes.
Oof.
Like, and they had a big bin there for you to throw up in. And it was just, that was the done thing. I joined the army in 2000. And yeah, that was, so that's 23 years ago now. Wow. But that was the done thing then. Was, yeah, and I'm sure there's probably some sort of initiations that go on when you join every other sort of group. But ours was big on drinking, and we used to go Friday, Saturday nights, but then we'd go out Thursday nights as well. And then because I joined the army when I was 17 and a half when I joined, but we'd go out into the pub, and I'd go out with all the big boys, so be able to scamp through, get without getting asked for ID and things like that, because I was 6'3", so I looked a bit older than 18 anyway. So hanging out with the big boys, I'd get in anyway into the pub. So we'd go out on Wednesday was student night, Thursday was the new Friday would go out, Saturday would go out, have a Sunday session. We'd get up at midday, go down to the pub, and would buy like trays of rum and cokes and sit there watching the rugby. And it was madness. And I'd get up 4 days a week doing training, like physical education training and things like that with the army, and obviously you do a lot of fitness, and that's probably one of the key things. And I think that's what sort of mastered even more, was I'd be able to smash down half a dozen beers or whatever it is on an evening, get up the next day and go run 10k easy, and do 20 25 pull-ups, 50 push-ups, whatever it would be. And then you just be like, I'm a bit ropey for the day. And that was it. But you get on.
Knowing what you know now, though, obviously with all the running that you do sober, do you think if you hadn't drunk during the army, you would have been so much fitter?
Oh, no doubt. I probably, 100%. But I was always up the front of the physical training and things like that. So I'd always push myself anyway. So it might have made it a little bit easier for me. And I mean, bear in mind at this time as well, I'd smoke as well. Like when I was on the beers, I'd have a smoke and things like that as well. So I wasn't doing anything decent for myself. But I think because I was so young, I could get away with it being 18, fit as a fiddle. And I've always just been able to, I could go out and run 5K easy. So even when I started getting back into running 4 years ago, like I was 115 kilos. So I was a big boy, but I went and ran 5K just straight off the bat. I mean, it took me, I think it was about 38 minutes or something. So, I was plodding along, but comparative to what I do now, but I could just get up and run. Always had that sort of fitness in there.
Yeah. So what was the turning point then? How did you get sober? What was the thought processes and actions that happened?
I guess in the back of my mind, I've always thought, you get to a certain point where you're like, I can't do this, and then you're like, I don't want to have another drink, and those types of things, and they're just in there. But I was just listening to podcasts, and like on Joe Rogan's podcast, he had so many sober people on there. And it was like all these people just talking about, they had crazy type of like backstories and things. And I was like, well, my drinking's not that bad. But then I was sort of thinking, well, do I really need to drink? And then Russell Brand was on there, and I listened to his story, and I was like, oh yeah, cool. And I was reading one of his books, and it was really, I was on a flight to Las Vegas for we're going on holiday for a few days. And I was two bottles of red wine in upper class, and I was watching A Star Is Born, and Bradley Cooper singing Maybe It's Time.
Yeah.
And it just sort of like, that was like my epiphany moment, where I just sort of thought, what I'm like, I think I was like mid-30s, I was like 36, and I was like, why am I sitting on a plane drinking 2 bottles of, like, I've drunk 2 bottles of red wine? I was like, maybe I should think about like looking at my drinking. But there wasn't any sort of, I woke up with spew all over myself and I'd crashed my
Yeah.
car or whatever type of. There was never a really like this is completely out of control type of. I mean, I'd had a few times where I'd woken up, on the bathroom floor and things like that, and shit yourself, or always all the really good things. But I'd never thought, oh, I've got to stop drinking for forever. I was like, oh, I'm just not going to drink for a week, and then I'd crack on again and I'd be back into it. But it was just watching that film, and then that was July 2019. And then from July through to the end of the year, I continued to drink. And then I made the decision in November that I was going to stop drinking for a year. So I was like, right, come January 1st, I'm not going to drink for a year. So December, I got hammered, like, it's Christmas parties and things like that. So I took it up another level. And, and then January 1st, I went, right, that's it. I'm not going to drink for a year. And then I was like, right, I listened to Russell Brand's, his sort of 12-step version.
Yeah.
Online, he did a 12-day course and just listened to that, and then started meditating, and that was it. And about 3 months in, I went, I'm never going to drink again. And yeah. 3 years.
It's funny how everyone's story is different, isn't it? I think watching A Star Is Born whilst drinking was the starting point for that to then suddenly manifest into itself now. Now we've got 3 minutes left, so it's brilliant that all that backstory, but you're running now. How's that? Because you're a running freak, if I'm allowed to say that.
Well, it's all relative, isn't it? But I guess as I said previously, like I've always had a good level of fitness. I think because I played rugby since I was 5, so I've always been running around, being high energy. But I started running in 2019. I was still drinking at the time, but once I gave up drinking in 2020, my running went on to another level. Lockdown came along, so I was put on furlough. So I had all this free time and just started running and running and running. And just, a bit Forrest Gumpish.
And then now you're a running coach now, aren't you? Just qualified.
So recently qualified as a coach in running fitness. Yeah, so you can now. It's going to be one of my little side hustles until I fake it till you make it.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I've followed your Instagram story from the day that I joined it. And it's just been great to see all the things that you've been doing. I'm not a runner. That's why I play golf. But it's great to see, and it is inspiring, all the stuff that you're doing. And then now you got a puppy. I'm sure. What was the puppy? What have you named the puppy?
It's Ragnar.
Ragnar.
But he's a bull mastiff, so he'll be more. I'll go on my runs, and then I'll take him for a nice cool down walk. He's not a running type of dog, definitely
not. It's been great having you on. I know we cut out a bit earlier when we were recording, so that cut a bit of the time off, which is a shame. But yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. It's really inspiring to see that the stoicism side of things as well. I think if anyone's listening to this and you want better mental health, I think stoicism's really helped my mental health. I'm not sure with you, but it just seems to make sense when you read the quotes and they're like, God knows how old now.
I guess for me, I've always sort of had those sort of like thoughts, and I'd never really known about them. But then once I discovered stoicism, I was like, this all makes sense for what I had been thinking in the past. And these guys said it 2,000 years ago, and it's
scary, isn't it?
100% relevant to what happens now.
Yeah, it's scary that it was so long ago, yet they went through the similar struggles with none of this social media stuff and everything like that as well.
Yeah, but that's what it's there, isn't it? It's brilliant stuff. I love the philosophy, just love really